Hello, welcome to another Black Horizons program. I'm your host, Hamid Rasheed. We're glad that you could join us for today's program. Today we'll be talking about drama. Over the winter of 1981, high school students at Gordon Bell and Cole Harbour High School worked on a play dealing with the story of Nova Scotia's Black Loyalists. The play, entitled Freedom, was given at the Sir James Dunn Science Theatre as part of the Nova Scotia High School Drama Festival, where it received very good response from those in attendance. The play was also covered by CBC TV, right, and is now available through the media services of the Department of Education. I've asked some of the people that were involved with the play to come along and be our guest on today's program. I have joining me Mr. Stan Christie, who is the drama director, and two of the actors in the play, Roger Finnigan and Shelley Hamilton. Welcome to all of you. Welcome to the Black Horizons program.
Thank you.
Stan, I mentioned in my introductory remarks that the play was done as part of what was then the Cole Harbour High School drama class. What kinds of things are you doing with the drama class, and tell us something about the Cole Harbour High School drama class.
Well, last year there were two schools, Gordon Bell High School and Cole Harbour High School. And at that time, students from Gordon Bell High School wishing to take drama came to me at Cole Harbour High and there are two courses in drama available which they could opt for. It is now, of course, Cole Harbour District High School, one school. Essentially, it has always been my practice in teaching drama to spend at least 2 months working on developmental skills, be it concentration, developing the imagination, sensitivity, and so on. But I have always led from that into collective creation. That is, I have always gotten the students to develop a drama of their own, collectively, using their own research, and through discussion and through improvisation, develop a script. And it has been customary to take that production to the Provincial High School Drama Festival.
I see. Why did you choose this particular approach? I recall being involved in some drama in my early days, and we didn't ever do anything like that. We usually had a script that was brought to us, and we were given our lines, and we practiced it and so on. Why have you opted for the other approach, the collective approach?
There are many reasons. I very often find, and I think a lot of people would agree who have seen high school productions where in many cases the students are spouting lines which really have not much meaning for them.
Yes.
They've memorized them and they are walking through a scene because the director has told them that this is how it should be. In a collective creation, the lines are the students' own, and they are real and they live, and each time they speak them, they have a life of their own. And I find through this whole process of problem solving and decision making that the students gain so much more than through the traditional process. I don't condemn the traditional process. I simply find that I get better results using the collective approach.
Mm-hmm. Well, Roger, were you one of the students that came from Gordon Bell, or were you a Cole Harbour student?
I was Cole Harbour all the way.
You were Cole Harbour all the way?
Yeah.
I see. Well, why was it that you chose to do a play on the Loyalists?
Well, during the class, when it first started out and we were going through our drama practices, Mr. Christie introduced the idea of writing our own play, and since it is, if your viewers know that Cole Harbour and Gordon Bell both have integrated black students and white students together, so we were tossing ideas around our heads, and we just came up with it. Somebody, I forget who came up with the idea, but we all liked it.
Well, actually, what it was, we'd had a school with blacks and whites, as Roger said, and when we found out who was going to be in the grade 11 drama class, it had turned out we had people from North Preston, Cole Harbour, Forest Hills area, Eastern Passage. I myself am from Cherry Brook, and it was kind of like all this color, and what can you do with it? Well, Mr. Christie came with a book that was about John Clarkson's expedition to Sierra Leone.
Yes. Right.
And he gave us the idea, and it was our own decision whether we wanted to work with it or not. And we decided to take it in and look at it and see if we really wanted to do it. So as a group, we decided we were going to work with it. And that's how it started from there.
Right. Well, now, Shelley, Stan has said that this was a truly cooperative effort. The youngsters were involved in I guess, all aspects of the play. How did that work? How did this thing evolve? How did you go from the idea in the book to the very moving presentation that we saw on CBC TV?
Well, from the ideas in the book, we went through research, and from the research we brought forth the ideas, how we were going to portray the story and what we wanted to put into the story. And once we found that, we used a lot of improvisation, and we also brought people in who would be knowledgeable in the area of history that we were studying, and that would give us more of an idea of how to go about it. So I'd say it was basically research and improvisation, and also people coming in and helping us.
Right. Well, you say we now. How many were in your group? How many people were part of this whole?
21.
21. All students, with the exception of yourself, Mr. Christie?
Yes, there are 21 people in the cast.
Right. I see.
I would want to point out, and I think it's very important, that in choosing to do a play about the Black Loyalists, that it was a strategy, perhaps, if I can use that word. Doing a production and doing a collective creation would have been probably the normal process out of that drama class. Because there was the racial and cultural differences, and therefore a lack, perhaps, of understanding and communication between those groups, I felt it very important that whatever we decided to do, that it address that issue and not ignore it. And therefore, the whole notion of turning back to history allowed the students to look at themselves now in a very safe and protected way.
Yes.
And I think that's important to point out.
Right. Well, now, how did you, I'm still trying to, I think the philosophy behind the collective approach is certainly a good one, but I'm wrestling with the idea in terms of who decided who would do what and so on. Was the decision arrived at in terms of who would do the research and who took the responsibility for preparing the scripts and so on? Could you tell us how that all fell together?
Well, all of the students were charged with doing research. They didn't all do the same kinds of research.
Yes.
They were then asked to bring in all of the information that they could.
Mm-hmm.
From that, developed a list, a limitless list of scene ideas.
Yes.
Things which were dramatically interesting. Those things which had to be told in order to tell the story of the Black Loyalists. Students then explored those through improvisation. And as they improvised, new scene ideas occurred. The scene which was being improvised was changed, adapted, modified. And finally, we had not just scene ideas, but a multitude of scenes.
Mm-hmm.
And these were then structured into a dramatic form or shape. It's a very long process, but that briefly is essentially the way it was.
Yeah. How long did it take you, Roger, to put it together? You said you worked over the winter.
Yeah, we started research about December, and that took us right up until April. And we actually started working on the script seriously working on it from January to April.
That would be January of 1982 of this year?
Yes.
Right. So was the presentation at the Jamestown Science Theatre, was that your first presentation of the play?
It was our first formal presentation of the play. We showed it to teachers, a group of teachers, about a week beforehand. And we were still throwing things together, tossing around ideas. It was by no means rushed, but we wanted to make sure we had a good, stable play to take to the festival.
Mm-hmm. Well, Stan, I want to come back to you for a moment. I didn't have a chance myself to see the live presentation. I did see the TV presentation, but I gather from the rumor mill that the play was very well received. You must have been very gratified by the response that the play was given.
Yes, I was. And especially, I think, to see the scene behind stage after that opening night at the festival. The audience literally came in droves from the house down onto the stage, and it was a scene of embracing, tears, parents beaming, with pride, really, with what their sons and daughters had done. It was a marvelous moment, really.
Shelley, what do you think accounted for that spontaneous response that you received from the audience? What do you think made the play work?
Well, in the audience, as Mr. Christie said, the parents were there. The parents of the students from North Preston and the parents from the other students that were in the play. And it was just like having everyone there in the present time looking at the past and seeing what their ancestors had gone through. And it was really eye-opening to them because it was their own children doing it. Their children doing something like that. It was so mind-blowing that they could actually put something like that together and make it come through and make it real and make not only them but the people around them react just as much as they were. It was just finding out an area of history about themselves that had never been told, and it was raw and it was alive, and it really got its message across, and I think that's what really made it exciting for so many people.
Yeah. What was the message? What, in your view, how would you say, what was the message behind freedom? How would you sum it up?
To me, I would say that a message that freedom was trying to get across was that when the blacks arrived here, their supposed freedom was not so. They still became indebted. They still had to fight to become who they are, to have an identity. And throughout this whole time, it's kind of like you're still looking for it. And when the play came about, it was a chance for people of our time now to look back and say, hey, that's a part of me, that's real. And it just came together in such a way that people really identified with it in that way.
Mm-hmm. Do you think part of the identification is because the storyline of the Loyalists is still somehow being played out in the lives of many of the black students?
It still is.
Roger, I'd be interested in getting some indication from you how you felt as a member of. What was the impact of doing this play? Was it as moving for you as it was for us to see it?
Well, probably more so in the fact that the audience doesn't know what goes on backstage, and
Yes.
and the sweat and the tears and the blood and everything we put into this play behind it. I think there may even be a deeper message in what went on backstage than what was even portrayed on stage. It was complete harmony between blacks and whites. I don't like using the term anymore because, there was just no difference between us. We were all actors. We all had a message to put across. We went out and we did it, and we cooperated, and we're just like one big happy family. And the second impact on me was the impact of drama that drama has.
Yeah, I have to agree with Roger. Just when you're behind stage, nobody realizes that you're all back and forth whispering and just looking at each other and saying, you can do it, you can do it. And you come forth and you do your scene, and you come back from behind stage and you just see everybody's faces beam. You were great, you were great. That was powerful. I really felt it, and I hope the audience felt it as much as you. And just sometimes, some scenes you do, you get so engulfed in your scene, you really didn't know what you'd do with yourself, and you were off stage, and you always had someone there that was ready to say, it's okay, it's all right. We still got a little bit more of the play to go, but it's okay. And It really was working together. And even though we were doing a play that was pertaining to blacks and whites in society at that time, there was no color between us. There wasn't any at all.
Was this there from the beginning, or was this something that emerged as you...
This emerged. Let me tell you, in the beginning, the classroom was all these little different areas all piled together. You had Kobe Village in one area and Forest Hills in another area, and Eastern Passage in one area and North Preston in another area. The classroom was totally segregated, and it wasn't until we finally started getting the play together and working with each other, doing the improvisations together, and realizing we had to become a group in order to make the play work, did we really realize how much we could get along with each other and work together. It was amazing. It really was amazing.
And of course, the collective creation process forces the students into a situation where they have to work together to solve the problems.
So that's one of the advantages of using
Yes,
this
it is.
kind of method. I have to apologize. I think we're probably driving our cameraman crazy today by shifting back and forth without any order in our questions. But the CBC took a tremendous interest. I think it's an indication of how well the play was done is indicated by the interest that was shown by the Canadian Broadcasting Network. How did it come about that the play was taped by CBC? Were you approached by the corporation to do the play?
Yes, we were. One of the producer of the show, Ralph Waugh, had seen the production at the Dunn Theatre,
Oh, yes.
and he was impressed with what he saw, and that led to the videotaping.
I see. Now, what other venues has the play been shown in besides the Sir James Dunn and the presentation we saw on CBC? Have you toured the play in other areas as well?
The Freedom was selected to represent Nova Scotia in the National Multicultural Theatre Festival in Regina in July of this year. We are talking about a provincial tour, either during the winter months or perhaps next summer during the Loyalist celebrations. I have had occasion to show the videotape, the CBC videotape, to an intercultural group in Alberta, made up of Secretary of State people, Access Television, Radio, and social service agents, and they have all praised the production, and indeed are requesting copies of that videotape for their own work. One person in particular wants to use that process with Native Indians in Cardston, Alberta. Another wants to use the process to work with Inuit people. The impact of the play has been enormous.
Also, for Canada Day, the students were invited by personal invitation to Province House in celebration for students who had shown in recognition in different areas of society, and we were chosen in the field of drama, and we considered it quite an honor to be guests at Province House and then to be guests at the Nova Scotia Tattoo also. So it was quite incredible, just a response from so many societies. It's just been great, from black societies and organizations as well. They've been so eager to help with funding and everything. It was really great.
So the impact of the play was at many levels, I guess we'd say. I'd like to spend the last remaining moments that we have talking to you, Roger, and to you, Shelley, about your interest in drama. Starting with you, Roger, was this the first presentation that you had taken part in? Or how long have you been involved in drama?
Yes, it was. I've been interested in drama for a while, and I've been a stage crew and stuff, but I was never actually on stage acting, portraying emotions. It was a new experience. Many people told me I pulled it off well, so I'm going to pursue a drama career in St. Mary's University, which I now attend.
I see you're going to specialize in drama.
Well, not only in drama. I'll do it as a hobby
I
and
see.
do a couple professional shows possibly, and we'll see how it takes it from there.
Right. Well, you certainly did do a fine job. Shelley, what about you? What are you going to? How have you used that beautiful voice other than in Freedom? Have you had a chance other than
Well,
other
I've
cases?
been singing I'd say publicly since grade 9. And I would have to say that singing is my first love, and I pursued it with other organizations and people. And right now, I'd have to say, if anything, I'd go to university first and do singing. But when I went to senior high and took grade 10 drama, it was a whole new opening for me. And it helped me also with my singing career. And doing something on stage in grade 10 was very eye-opening, so I took grade 11. And then the experience with the play Freedom was actual stage experience with a real audience rather than a school audience. It was such power in it. It was so overwhelming for me. I'd probably take it in a field also along with my music.
Mm-hmm. Well, now, going back to the impact of the play on the school, when we had a program earlier, viewers of this program will recall, we talked to Don Trider about the amalgamation of the school, and there was a lot of discussion, shall we say, and confusion around the amalgamation of the school, and as a result of that, there was some suggestion that there were difficulties between the students coming from the different communities. Has there been a lasting impact on that as a result of the Freedom, in your opinion, Mr. Christie? Or is that asking too much from one production?
I would say that Freedom, in a statement, is a concrete demonstration of the fact that peoples of different racial and cultural backgrounds can work together harmoniously to achieve a desired end. And I can't help but feel that that play has had a tremendous impact on the student population.
I would agree. I would totally agree. When we came back to school, a lot of the discussion was about, did you go to Regina, and how did you work with the play, and how did you read along? I mean, there was just so much curiosity about the play itself. And I mean, this year it seems you have a whole new opening to the people you're going to school with and everything. It's just so different. And a lot of the other people who were in the play feel the same way.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'll say here, it's not just within the school itself. Just for an example, taking a walk through Scotia Square.
Yeah.
Me and Shelley were
Roger.
taking a walk through Scotia Square, and it has had a tremendous effect on the community as well.
This
not
lady just noticed us out of the blue and said, you were in that Freedom play. It was, just audience response. It was 3 times in that one day that people noticed either me or Roger from the play. It was quite exciting. Oh, we're popular.
Mm-hmm. Well, now, Mr. Christie, I may be asking you to tip your hand too early, but what have you got in the making for this year? Are you working on it? I know you're going to be back to school for a short time, but are you already making plans for a follow-up to Freedom?
Inevitably, we will definitely be doing another collective. Exactly what it will be, we don't know.
Right.
I would like to do something in keeping with the celebrations, the Loyalist celebrations next year.
Do you have the same group of students to work with? Is your drama class as a result of all the enthusiasm that was created by Freedom? Are you bursting out at the seams for the students wanting to take drama, or?
Well, there are 35 students right now in my introductory course, which is a considerable increase. There is a new enthusiasm, I think, sure.
Right. And you mentioned earlier about Freedom, before we give up on Freedom. Freedom isn't dead yet. You were saying that you want to tour Nova Scotia. How close to reality are you with that? Is there a good possibility that that'll come about?
Well, it would be difficult for me to say much more than that. We have been talking to the Secretary of State Department. They're very interested. In fact, the suggestion came from them, and it's very close to reality.
Mm-hmm. There was some suggestion that was made that it might be nice to have this play taken to Sierra Leone, seeing as how the play deals with the migration of Loyalists from Nova Scotia to Sierra Leone. What would you feel about an idea like that?
It's a tremendous idea, and it's one which I have harbored for some time. I have not discussed it with anyone, so it would be very difficult for me to say much more. But again, I'm very enthusiastic with that idea. I would love to see that develop.
Yeah.
It would be just a whole new extension of the students' experience. and the personal enrichment would be
Yeah, just
tremendous.
add another dimension. I think it also would be interesting if somehow contact could be made with a high school in Sierra Leone, and they could do a sequel, perhaps to something portraying what the circumstances of the community when they arrived there in Sierra Leone.
Exactly. It'd be wonderful.
I understand that there's still quite a bit of the identity of the Nova Scotians who went there. I was talking to a chap from Sierra Leone last summer, and we were discussing the possibilities of an exchange visit, and he was telling me about the various things in present-day Freetown which still are traceable to the Loyalists who went to Sierra Leone in 1792, 1793, I guess it was, wasn't it?
1792.
1792. I want to come back to you, Roger and Shelley, again, just for a moment, and ask you that we were talking about the impact. And I think you've said to me already that the impact was tremendous on both of you. Do you think if it hadn't been for your participation in this play that you would have been as keen on drama as you now are?
Well, who's going to go first? Okay, I will. Well, for me, when I'd taken first year drama, I'd loved the experience. I loved the experience of finding so many different things about myself just by doing so much improvisation and a small collective play that we had done. And I probably would have taken it again, but right now, because like with Roger's character, it was an emotional experience for him, and for my character, it was an emotional experience for me, and I would have never given up the opportunity to do that. And if I had another chance again, I would not give it up. Whereas if I had not taken 11 drama, I probably would have been skeptical or not even inquired about the idea of going further into dramatic studies at all. It's just for a character to take you and form you and make you become that character. It's just an incredible experience, and I would go through it again.
What about you, Roger? Are you issuing decrees to your fellow students? Have you been able to divorce yourself from your character of the governor in the play Freedom?
I think I have, pretty much. I was involved, going back to your original question,
Yeah.
I was involved in the performing arts before as a musician. And I had drama pretty well in my blood from, I guess, whenever I seen a live play at Neptune for the first time. And it was just until last year that we started doing the play that I actually started getting involved in it, but I think it would have probably been inevitable anyway.
Right. Well, I want to thank you all for appearing on the program and sharing with us some insights about what went on behind the scenes in the play. I think our viewers are perhaps now better able to appreciate, some of the impact beyond the impact that took place on them when they saw the play. I want to wish you all luck in your respective careers. Mr. Christie, I hope you will be successful in putting together the tour to Sierra Leone. I'd like to go as a stagehand or anything that I might be able to do. For those of you in our viewing audience who haven't yet had a chance to see the play, I certainly would recommend that you try to see it. I understand, as I said in my introduction, that the play is available from the Department of Education, their Media Services section, and I certainly would recommend that you see it if you haven't. Thank you for watching our program. Join us next week. Hello, welcome to another Black Horizons program. I'm your host, Hamid Rasheed. Today we'll be talking about the number 2 Construction Battalion, an all-black battalion who served overseas in the First World War. To talk about the experience of the number 2 Construction Battalion, we've asked Kelvin Ruck, who is a board member of the Black Cultural Society and co-chairman of the Veterans Reunion and Recognition Dinner, to come along to be our guest on Black Horizons. Kelvin, welcome to our program.
Thank you, Hamid.
I wonder if we could begin by having you perhaps give us some information about the Cultural Society's upcoming recognition and dinner and reunion for the veterans of the number 2 Construction Battalion, and I guess veterans of other First World War black veterans as well.
That's right, Hamid. The main event actually will be the banquet, which is scheduled for Friday, November the 12th at 7:30 p.m. at the Lord Nelson Hotel, Imperial Ballroom. That's in Halifax.
Mm-hmm.
That'll be the kickoff.
Right. Now, I understand that a weekend of activity has been planned. Can you give us some ideas about some of the events that will be taking place?
The banquet on Friday night is a public event that's open to the public. Then on Saturday we plan to have a number of events with respect to the reunion for the veterans themselves. We're planning on taking them on a tour of the city.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, we propose to visit Pier 2. And we've already received permission for this from the powers that be. That's the Naval Dockyard to visit Pier 2. Pier 2 was a pier that they sailed from for overseas in 1917. As a matter of fact, Pier 2 was the main embarkation point for all Canadian troops leaving Canada from the port of Halifax. We also propose to take them on a tour of other points of interest, such as the Military Museum, Citadel Hill. We propose perhaps to visit the former site of Africville, as Africville was a community in the days when World War I was on. So some of them may have visited Africville and may want to see that particular site. Perhaps we go and visit Point Pleasant Park,
Mm-hmm.
so they can look out to the sea from whence they sailed and went overseas. We'll also leave it open for them to make some decisions of things they would like to see and do. In the afternoon, we propose to do some taping and get their memories down, their memoirs down on tape. Some of their adventures overseas and some of the things that happened to them while they're over there, and probably some of the things that have happened since they returned. And Saturday evening, we propose to have a reception for the veterans and their wives, and also invited guests. That is not a public event. That will just be for a very limited number of people due to the space available.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, that's what we propose for Friday and Saturday. Then Sunday, we hope to visit a local church for those who are still around. You must remember, these men are in their 80s,
Mm-hmm.
84, 85, 86. I think there's one gentleman in his 90s. So we're not certain as to how many will be around for Sunday. So we're trying to leave things unstructured so that they feel free to leave at any point in time.
Right.
Many of them are I imagine, are having health problems,
Yes.
due to their advanced years.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, those are the main events. What we propose for the weekend of November 12th, 13th, and 14th, which will be following Remembrance Day on November 11th. So we feel this ties in very good with Remembrance Day.
Mm-hmm. How is it and why is it that the Black Cultural Society decided to hold this reunion and dinner for the veterans of the First World War, Kelvin?
Well, there's a number of reasons. I think one of the main reasons is the fact that the Black Cultural Society, our mandate is to protect and preserve black culture, black history. And we look on this as a very significant part of our history and the role that blacks played in World War I. I think it's fair to say that it's an unknown role. Many people have never heard of Number 2 Construction Battalion, and many people are unaware that blacks served at all in World War I. It's been sort of one of Canada's best kept secrets, the fact that our fathers and our grandfathers served in that particular war. Another reason, which is one of the main reasons, is the fact that we feel these people should be recognized and honored while they're still here. I think many times we make the mistake of waiting, then you hear a lot of good things said about people after they're gone. But we feel this is the time, and it may be one of the last occasions. As I said earlier, these people are in their advanced years, and they deserve some recognition while they were here. I don't think they didn't receive any medals for their, other than the standard medals that all veterans receive. I don't think they received any individual recognition, at least not by people in general, especially by the black community. We've overlooked these people in our midst, and these people are history, and we want to make sure that people are aware and recognize and appreciate the history that these people have made. And it's something that we've got to pass on to future generations.
Indeed. I'm sure you're right when you say that many people are unaware of the number 2 Construction Battalion, and unaware generally of the contribution of blacks in the war effort. I wonder if I could ask you to give us some idea of what the situation was like at the beginning of World War I for a black man who wanted to involve himself in the war effort by becoming a member of the armed forces of the time. What was the situation like for blacks?
Well, Hamid, I think you're aware that any time you dig into history, especially history involving black people, you uncover some things that may not always be that pleasant. It was a very controversial time for the black man with respect to service in the Canadian Armed Forces during World War I. As a matter of fact, it carried over into World War II. There were problems in World War II also with respect to blacks joining the armed forces. World War I was an extremely difficult time, and it's not a very pleasant story. There were restrictions. You heard things said in different parts of the country. Basically, blacks did not get into the armed forces in World War I on equal terms with whites. There were restrictions. Some were accepted, and many were rejected based on their race. It wasn't a medical thing. I think we must remember that it was sort of like an all-boys club. It was a very momentous time in Canada, a very exciting time. There was a World War, and Canada had not been a nation that long. So you have people very excited about getting into the armed forces, wanting to come to grips with the German Empire. This was a war to save democracy. So it was a very exciting time. Within a few months after Canada declared war, Canada got involved in the war in August. Within a few months, the first Canadian troops had landed in England, ready to go and to come to grips with the enemy. So you can see the tremendous upsurge in patriotism. People wanted to do something for their country. So blacks also were affected in that same way. They wanted to serve their country. What happened, you just didn't join the army in 1914-18. I'm not sure what happened in 39-45, but 1914-18, you just didn't join the army. They were recruiting through battalions. You either joined a battalion or you joined a artillery battery or whatever. You just didn't join in, and then they sent you to different battalions. They would call for recruits for a specific battalion in a specific time and place. For instance, if Halifax was recruiting for the PLF, well, they may be looking for 1,000 men. When they reach that 1,000 men, that would be the cutoff. And in some cases, many times I understand they were over-recruited. So they may take maybe 1,500 men into a battalion. So they have the battalion strength plus a number of reserves for reinforcements. So initially there were all kinds of people wanting to get in the army. And the recruiting stations were swamped. So they had their pick. They took who they wanted, and those that didn't want, they didn't take them. And blacks were in the unwanted category. But we have to be careful here. There were some battalion commanders. They had to say, the commanding officers had to say, and they took who they wanted. But some commanding officers did accept blacks into their battalions. And some blacks got into the combat battalions and served overseas. Some were wounded and some died. But the masses, no battalion that I'm aware of, combat battalion, took very many black soldiers. I understand the 106 Overseas Battalion that was organized around 1916. They had approximately 16 or 18 blacks. And the records indicate that was probably the largest number of any battalion in Nova Scotia. Now, there may be others, but research today hasn't located that. So you can see that they didn't get in large numbers. When I'm talking about 16 or 18 black soldiers, they would be among a battalion of probably 1,000 or 1,200 men.
Yes.
So you can see the proportion was very small, and 16 or 18 could be integrated or assimilated quite readily. But as far as taking large numbers are concerned, many of the commanding officers did not, they refused to take large numbers of blacks.
Didn't this become quite a controversial issue between headquarters in Ottawa and the local battalion commanders? Weren't there differences of opinion in terms of what should be done?
Yeah, that's a fact. It appeared, according to what I've read, the research I've done, the first recorded protest against this policy of rejecting black people by command officers came from a gentleman in Ontario. I think his name was Arthur Alexander. He lived in Buxton, which is an old black community in Ontario, one of the oldest black communities in Canada. Blacks were being turned away, and he was a leader in that black community, and he wrote to the Minister of Militia, and he asked a question very plainly and very bluntly: why can't black men get into the armed forces? And the Minister of Militia wrote back to him, Sir Sam Hughes wrote back to Mr. Alexander and stated that the selection of recruits is in the hands of local commanding officers, and we at headquarters do not interfere with that process. That was his answer.
Mm-hmm.
But the protests continued. There was a gentleman in Hamilton who had been rejected, a black gentleman, and he also wanted to know why. He just didn't take no for an answer. He wrote to Sir Sam Hughes. There's no record of what the reply was. And then later on, there was a gentleman in Toronto, I think his name was J.B.R. Whitney. He was a publisher, he was a leader in the community. He was a publisher of a weekly newspaper called the Canadian Observer, which was sort of a black newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
And he wanted to raise a platoon. See, this was happening also. Prominent people in Canada were raising battalions and platoons.
Yes.
There was record of Con Smith, the former owner of Toronto Maple Leafs. He raised a battery, an artillery battery, to go overseas. He raised it and equipped it. So this was happening also. If you were a man of means and had connections, you could raise a battalion and just ask permission, and you got permission.
Yes.
And many times those people became like the commanding officer, like their own little private battalion, whatever. And now Whitney asked for permission to raise a black platoon. And he wrote to Sir Sam Hughes, the Minister of Militia, for permission, sir, and Hughes replied back, he saw no reason why not. In other words, go ahead and raise your platoon.
Mm-hmm.
So he started recruiting for this platoon, and he advertised in his paper, you know, he was trying to get the blacks excited with joining the army. He had headlines such as the Germans feared black troops in the trenches. He was doing an advertising campaign to get blacks interested in joining the army. So it appeared that he attracted maybe about 100 or so who were interested in joining. So after he got them ready to go, then he tried to recruit a sergeant from one of the regular battalions, a black sergeant. And at that point in time, that's when they found out that no battalion would accept this black platoon. So here he had 60 to 100 men ready to go to war,
Yes.
but nowhere to go because you didn't go off to war in platoon-sized strength. You had to be a part of a battalion. So that was rather embarrassing to the Canadian government, of course, because Sir Sam Hughes was saying on the one hand, blacks can get in any battalion, but the commanding officer was still running the show.
Yes.
They found ways and means of getting around his orders.
Yes.
Okay, so on the strength of that, it was brought. They had other things, of course, many more important things to worry about than the fact that blacks weren't being accepted. That was considered a very minor issue. They were fighting a war to save democracy. But anyhow, they had to deal with this issue because blacks were complaining, making a protest. There's no record of any protest, any organized or major protest from the Maritimes. Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Ontario seemed to be taking the lead role.
Yes.
As far as blacks were concerned. So anyhow, the chief of the general staff, Major General Gwatkin, he wrote a memo to Sir Sam Hughes, I would imagine, and he said some things in that memo that weren't very complimentary to blacks, such as blacks wouldn't make good troops, good fighters in the trenches and those kinds of things, and white soldiers would not want to serve on equal basis with blacks. So he said there's no point in blinking the facts, and he also indicated that the blacks didn't want to join the army due to a high sense of loyalty, but they were sort of imitators. They were imitating the whites. The whites were going in the army, and blacks wanted to go in also, not because of a sense of loyalty to Canada. He was questioning the loyalty of blacks, in other words. Mm-hmm. But anyhow, he said the only thing, he came up with a compromise, a suggestion. In other words, he wasn't altogether all negative. He thought that blacks could still serve a useful purpose. So he said the only solution to the problem would be to form one or two labor battalions of blacks, particularly Nova Scotian blacks, according to the memo, because of our capacity for labor or whatever, and to offer these battalions to the British government for service, perhaps in Egypt or some part of the world where the British government saw fit. And on the strength of that memo, the Canadian government authorized the formation of number 2 Construction Battalion.
Well, I guess there was a period of time, though, before that, as I understand the history of the thing, they initially they rejected the idea of having these segregated battalions. Initially, they took the position that they shouldn't, that they, the blacks should be able to enter any battalion of their choice. I wonder if I could get you to. You've talked a bit about one person's position on why blacks couldn't join the battalions, but I wonder if I could get you to expand a little bit more on some of the arguments that were put forward to reject the service of the blacks as in the combat battalions, for example. And I understand this was something that went right across the country. It was from the east to the west coast. There was, almost universal rejection of blacks as fighting men.
Yeah, this was happening from Vancouver, I'd say, to Sydney, my old hometown in Sydney, from east to west. One of the things they were saying that a black fighting battalion would be hard to reinforce, because you must appreciate the fact there weren't that many black people in Canada of military age. They say for a battalion in the field of 1,000 men, you would need maybe another 2,000 or 3,000 on a monthly basis to reinforce that battalion, because the Canadian Army was they were suffering a lot of casualties in their front lines. That was one of the reasons they gave that a black battalion of combat troops would be hard to reinforce. And I would imagine there's some truth to that. Also, they felt that the white troops in the front lines would not welcome blacks in the lines with them. They questioned the fighting abilities of black troops as combat soldiers, which is a very interesting thing that the Indian population had no problems at all getting into the armed forces in either war. As a matter of fact, they were recruited. And they went in large numbers, and they lost a lot of people in the armed forces. In other words, they were saying the Indians had more of a tradition as fighting men than blacks. They questioned the ability of blacks to bear arms. Yeah.
Robin Winks, in his book Blacks in Canada, also suggested that this wasn't the first instance that blacks had encountered difficulty, that he suggested that during the Boer War there was a reluctance to allow blacks to fight as well, because there was some reluctance to have blacks in the Boer War, of course, in South Africa, fight against the Caucasian community. They were, do you think that this might have been a factor as well during the First World War? They didn't want to have create this fighting capacity in the black community?
Yeah, there's a lot of truth to that. During the Boer War, I understand there were some blacks got in the armed forces. What numbers I'm not sure of, but that was one of the questions that were asked. Evidently, that but the fact blacks bearing arms against whites. I think another reason I would feel would be a factor was that blacks were looked on as second-class citizens, and maybe less than that. And when a man becomes a soldier, it's a pretty responsible position, and you can't give him full responsibility one day, next day tell him that he's not a complete man. Service in the military, I'm not a military man myself, didn't serve, but I think service in the military develops leadership, and throughout our history, many of our leaders have been people who served in the armed forces. Thomas Peters, the gentleman who sort of instigated the movement to Sierra Leone. He was a sergeant in the Black Pioneers, and Stephen Bluck, a colonel in Shelburne there, he was an officer. So there might have been this reluctance to give blacks this kind of opportunity, this kind of training that suggested that they were first-class citizens. And then when the war was over, what do you do with these people? Do you tell them then that they're no longer first-class citizens? I think the same thing happened in the USA, where blacks served in the armed forces, and once they came into the armed forces, they were looking for the same equal rights as other people, and which is the way it should be. You can't, on the one hand, ask a man to risk his life to fight for his country, and then when he gets back on Civvy Street, telling him that he can't live where he wants to, or do the job that he's qualified to do, or other second-class treatment.
Right. Well, turning now to the number 2 Construction Battalion, I guess it was decided that although they perhaps wouldn't make or shouldn't be allowed the opportunity to become fighting men, they did suggest that because of blacks' capacity for labor, that they should be in a construction battalion. Can you give us some idea of the composition of that battalion? Where did the men come from? How was it made up?
It was a very interesting story. The blacks came from all over the country. They recruited black men to join the army. They went to wherever black people were located. They sent recruiting officers there to recruit them. And this was an exciting time because probably many blacks weren't aware of the fact too that there was a policy prior to that, not a policy, but there was that they were restricted. In other words, here was people recruiting black people, and many blacks joined from Vancouver to Cape Breton Island.
I understand there were some Americans and West Indians in the battalion as well.
That's true. There were approximately 125 to 150 Americans that they recruited from the USA. Now, some of these people had been in the American Army according to the nominal roll. They had service in the American Army. Now, how this was done, I'm not sure. That's something that's being researched at this point in time as to how these Americans were recruited. Now, the West Indian people, West Indian men who were in the number 2 Construction Battalion, they were people who were living in Canada, who were working in Canada. Many came from my hometown in Sydney. They were recruited, so they had already been in the country. I don't think they went to the West Indies to recruit people. They were Canadian. They were working in Canada, and they were recruited right here in Canada.
I understand that though the many of the coal miners and many of the steel workers, I guess, in the Cape Breton area were prevented from joining the battalion.
They were exempted, because they were working in what was considered an essential industry.
Yes.
Even in the Second War, you could receive exemption if you were holding on a job that was considered vital to the war effort. And the blacks and the whites who worked in the steel plant and the coal mines in Sydney were considered exempt. Although later on in the war, they did change that to some degree, and they took some of the younger men who were previously exempted because of the nature of their work.
Right. So we have the number 2 Construction Battalion formed. When did it leave for overseas, and what kind of activity, what kind of service did they see overseas?
The battalion was authorized in July 1916. They trained in Truro and Pictou, and then, according to the record, they sailed from Halifax, I think it was around in March of 1917. They landed in England. They were in England for a short period of time. Then they were reduced to a company. The battalion never reached full strength. I think full strength for a battalion is probably in the vicinity of 1,000 men. They never reached that number. So they were reduced to company strength. Even the commanding officer, Dan Sutherland, who came from Pictou, he was a white man. And there were 2 black officers. There was one black officer in the battalion, Reverend William A. White. He was the chaplain. He became pastor of Cornwallis Street Baptist Church in 1919. So he was the only black officer, I understand, in the whole British Empire.
Yes.
Although he was honorary captain. But when they went overseas, they were broken into, they were reduced to company strength. So that meant that some of the men stayed in England to maintain the base camp, and the rest went to France a few months later. And they were attached to the Forestry Corps, Canadian Army, Canadian Expeditionary Force, and they served in France. And men who were up in the Jura Mountains, which was fairly close to Switzerland. They were cutting logs for the trenches. And the trenches, if you ever seen pictures of the trenches,
Yes.
you have to hold them up with something. And so they were performing pretty useful work. And the logs they were cutting were also for the railway lines that were running to the front. So they were performing what would be considered a very vital service. And they were commended for their service to the Forestry Corps.
Right.
They'd done a job they were asked to do.
Right. I understand that after the war was over, there was an incident, a riot, and when the number 2 got back to Britain, did your research? Did you come across any details of this particular incident?
Yes, I did. Matter of fact, I talked to some of the veterans who were over there, and there's some different stories as to what really happened. I think they all agree there was a riot.
Yes.
That's a documented fact. There was a riot involving people from number 2 Construction Battalion and some white troops that they were billeted next to or stationed nearby. This was during a time when people were coming back, and they were looking to come to Canada. They're looking to sail from England, Liverpool, whatever, to Canada. It was a time when people's nerves were pretty well uptight. People wanted to get back home. And appeared that there was some interruption with a parade that the blacks were having, not a parade in the normal sense. I think it was a bath parade. They were heading to the showers or whatever, and someone disrupted the line of march, either to greet somebody or either drunk or whatever. So there's conflicting stories as to what happened. But anyhow, it appeared that this was a white soldier. He was arrested by the provost sergeant for the black battalion, number 2 battalion. He was arrested and put in the brig because you don't just cut into a line of troops. When some things are happening. So he was arrested for that reason, I understand. And then some members of his battalion or platoon, whatever, tried to get him out of the brig.
I see.
And so they would have to come, they came in contact then with the black provost sergeant or the black soldiers who were guarding this man who was in the brig. And I understand that led to the riot.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't something that developed over a period of time. It appeared to develop over one incident.
Yes.
This was the fact that this man had been arrested, and he was arrested by a black provost sergeant, and he was locked up, and some whites came to get him out of there.
Took exception to that.
Yeah, and it led to this brawl.
There were no incidents of any other incidents, though, while they were actually involved in service overseas. I don't
No,
understand.
I'm talking to some of the veterans, and according to the record I've read, they get along very good.
Yeah.
They served with people from different countries. I think there were Russians in the camp, Irish people. There were people from in the different camps from all over the world, and they said they got along very good. They didn't have any problems while overseas. Yeah.
Right. I understand there were some once back home in Truro.
Mm-hmm.
There were some additional problems at the retention camp there in Truro. What did you discover in your research about that?
Reading what Winks had to say in his book Blacks in Canada, he done quite extensive research on number 2 Construction Battalion, and indicated that there were problems in Truro before they went overseas.
Mm-hmm.
There were definitely problems in Truro, and they had problems in the theaters in Truro, at least on one theater. Blacks were expected to sit upstairs, and these black soldiers going to war for the country took exception to this, rightly so.
Mm-hmm.
And they insisted on sitting anywhere in the theater, and there were some problems with that. So when they came back from overseas, according to Winks, he doesn't state the reason, a number of black soldiers were beaten up in Truro, and it could have been a riot, but the officers intervened and cooled the situation down. And shortly thereafter that, the camp was disbanded.
Mm-hmm. Well, in the few minutes that we have left, I want to talk to you about some of the methodology that you used in terms of locating. It must have been a tremendously difficult job to locate these veterans after all these many years. How many did you locate, and how did you do it?
We located approximately 17 or 18 veterans. There are some right here in the city of Halifax, some that we didn't even know were veterans. Sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees.
Mm-hmm.
Again, as I said, a lot of people weren't aware that these people had served. So we located 5 right here in the city. By talking to people who were here, they gave us some names of people who had served with them that they knew were alive, and then some they thought were dead that were not dead. And I think one thing to point out in our research in finding the men was the value of an organization, of a provincial organization, which the Black Cultural Society is. We have board members scattered throughout the province.
Yes.
So once we had the nominal role, which was the sort of the Bible of who was in the battalion, at least the people who went overseas with the battalion, we broke it down into counties, and we sent that out to different board members and asked them to try to locate these people, see who was dead and who was alive.
We have a few seconds left on today's program. Very quickly, could you tell us once again when the banquet will be held and where people can get tickets?
November 12th, 7:30 p.m. at the Lord Nelson Hotel will be the public banquet. Tickets are available at the Scotia Drug Center, Gaudigan and Cornwallis, and at the Aging Opportunity Center on Cornwallis Street, also at the Nova Scotia Home for Colored Children Black Cultural Center office at that location.
Thank you very much, Kelvin, and your society should be commended for this very worthwhile effort. Thank you for watching our program. Join us next week. kind of thing.
Yeah, as I said earlier, the banquet on November the 12th is a public affair.
Yes.
The public is invited, and we're trying to impress on them to come out to this event because
Yes.
it may be the last of its kind.
Yes.
It's the first of its kind, it may be the last of its kind.
Right.
There may be others, but we can't speak for the future.
Mm.
So that will be on, the banquet will be on November the 12th
Mhm.
at 7:30 p.m. at the Lord Nelson Hotel. Tickets are available at the Scotia Drug Center, corner of Godigan and Cornwallis, and also the Aging Opportunity Center on Cornwallis Street, next door to Cornwallis Street Baptist Church. And here on the Dartmouth side, you can get tickets at the